introduce the panelists, starting with the audience's left. We have Brian Coco, who is Executive Director and Assistant General Counsel for IP at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. Brian, thanks for being back on stage. Next to him is Gary LaBelle, and Gary is a Chief IP Counsel, and he was former Chief Patent Counsel for Nestle's, among other jobs in the past. Gary, great to have you here with us today. Next to Gary is Dhruv Sood, and he is Senior Director, Assistant General Counsel, also at Regeneron. So thanks for joining the panel, Dhruv. And then last but certainly not least is Julia Tauti, and she is a founding member at Anchor AI. So thank you for being here. Now, I really don't want to introduce this topic because all things being truthful, this was Brian's idea. We worked on it together, but he has a very specific idea of why he wanted to do this conversation. So Brian, why don't I just kick it over to you to maybe lay the premise, and we'll start there and go from there with the conversation.
The reason that I picked this topic is I go to conferences all over the place and I listen to various topics of AI, but one thing that I think is kind of underrepresented in CLE programming and others is the idea of data protection. And so we as IP lawyers often think about patents, but it's not so common that we think about confidential information and trade secrets. And we live in a data economy. And even in pharmaceutical companies where we don't think about data, there's a lot of it, right? Lots and lots of data that we have unpublished. Some of it supports our patent applications. Some of it supports our manufacturing processes. And now we have this idea where we're going to have these cool new tools which can ingest all of that data, right? But the question is, well, what are the risks, right? Have we actually thought about, so it's a cool, shiny new rocket and we're going to use it, but what about using it responsibly? What about using it in a way that enables you to extrapolate all the benefits from it, but still protects the data and the things that you put into it? So I thought this would be a good topic that Gene and I can discuss and bring our panel together to talk about the risks and talk about the risk mitigations, as well as sort of the benefits for using it in the pharmaceutical industry. So I think that's what our panel discussion is going to be like today.
Yeah, and one thing I would just add to that is your team is using AI, whether you know that they're using AI or not. And you are using AI, whether or not you know you're using AI. Now, it may just be as simple as you're going to Google and you're consuming that blurb at the very top where they try and digest it, but everybody's got AI going on, some purposely, some accidentally. But with that comes a whole lot of risk. And one of the things I thought was one of the most insightful things I ever heard about this topic was from Jason Harrier, when he said, look, you have to have a policy, but it can't be the perfect policy because it needs to be a policy that your people actually follow. And if you give them the perfect policy, they're likely not going to follow it, and then they're going to be lying to you, and they're going to be off doing their own things, and then you don't know what risk you are walking into and whether you should or shouldn't be doing that, and et cetera. So that's really the conversation we want to have, while at the same time understanding that the reason why you and your people are going to use this is because it's beneficial. But I think it's just eyes wide open, right? So does anybody else have preliminary thoughts? Maybe we could go to Gary and then we'll go down the line. Before we move forward with that, is there something you want people to focus on?
Well, one is touching on what you just said, because I had an old colleague I was talking to about a week or two ago that was telling me the company he works for has a policy, they can only use certain AI, everything. He was sitting in the cafeteria having lunch, he saw two engineers talking, and the one goes, oh, let me look that up, and he went right on to ChatGPT on his phone. So you never know when these things are being used, and he heard a couple stories about people, they would go home and use it. Oh yeah, we use it all the time. I go home, I can't use it here.
Yeah. So they are using it, for sure.
Yes.
Dhruv?
Yeah, so I would say that, look, as somebody who represents the IP function in Regeneron's AI governance processes, seeing firsthand how quickly AI and how rapidly it's transforming, how data is handled, how IP and trade secrets are handled in our systems, It's not the same world anymore. Like, you can't just go to your IT guys and say, hey, you got this, you're securing my stuff, we're good here. Data governance is becoming a huge issue now, and and traditional IT parameters of security are not going to work anymore. Just think about how your IP is handled on a daily basis even now, right? Your IP goes between employees, it goes between different business functions, it goes from employees to vendors, vendors to their subcontractors. Now imagine in all those relationships, you're inserting an AI tool that can potentially leak things, it can commingle things, it can contaminate things. All of that gets amplified with the use of AI tools. So I personally think it should, going forward, be part of every IP attorney's practice to do some form of AI governance, whatever that means for you, to keep an eye on these risks going forward.
Excellent, great, thanks. And Julia?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I think the world of IP specifically is moving very quickly in the adoption of AI. And with that, I think, comes the interest of data, thinking about the data, how it's being used, and making sure that you feel part of that conversation of shaping the governance of AI tools and the adoption of AI tools in the way that works best for you. So I think that's something that would be quite interesting to talk about as well.
Awesome, great. So Brian, let's go back to you. You have a list of concerns or issues that you want to flag with people. Maybe we could start there and kick it around.
Yeah, so I think there's lots of different flavors of artificial intelligence tools that we use, and it's becoming ubiquitous. It's in everything now, and if it's not, it's certainly going to be everything that we use. The tool I wanted to use to sort of illustrate some of the risk profile today is M365 Copilot. So it's a tool that's being sort of deployed rapidly. Everybody who I think uses it says it's great, or others sort of want to use it. And it's being deployed on your Microsoft environment. So if you use Word, Outlook, PowerPoint, all of that, if you have Copilot, it will appear and it will be in the entire Microsoft universe. And so what the starting point with that means that it can see everything that is within your universe. And so if you have Copilot, it can see every document on your hard drive. It can see every document that you have access to in a Teams channel. It can see every document that you can have access to in a SharePoint, for example. And that SharePoint need not even be your SharePoint. So as long as you're plugged into a SharePoint somewhere in your organization, then your version of Copilot can see all of that. And it goes on, and then you can have new plugins that connect Copilot to other products. So think about the universe of documents, of data and information that this simple tool of Copilot can ingest at any given time. And let's think about sort of what the risk profile of that can do. So I'll break it down in a couple of different chunks, and then I'll talk through each one in a little bit more detail. So the first risk with using this is sort of the data loss. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. Data contamination. We'll talk a little bit more of that. Some novel new legal risks that we think are popping up with the use of a tool like this. And then I'll conclude a little bit, which is a bit in the weeds, but I think it's best to touch on it, is it has the ability to record meetings and transcribe them. And that can create all kind of new type of things that people haven't really thought about. So going back to the top of my list, which is the data loss. Right. So remember, this tool can access a very wide swath of information. Some of it is going to be trade secrets, some of it is going to be confidential, and the reality is you may not know which. So it's just going to pull it in as you ask it to create something for you. It's going to query your entire universe, give you a new product that you might email out, not you, or someone in your organization might email out, might share with somebody, might use as a PowerPoint that they take to a meeting, not realizing that the information that it used to create that new document was a trade secret or confidential information. And so using a tool like this can weaken trade secret protection by making an external disclosure, but also via an internal disclosure. So if you don't practice in the trade secret area, courts are going to look at trade secrets to make sure you've done things to keep it a secret. And if you start spreading things internally throughout your organization, even though it's still within the organization, it's going to be looked at as possibly diluting it or not, doing the right thing diligently to keep the protections in place. And so a tool like this can enable both internal and external trade secret weakening or disclosures. The other aspect of it is similar to that is you can imagine a case where you have someone in your organization has your next drug. It's kind of not completely baked. There's no patent protection on it, but all the data is there and you're accumulating it. It's stored in a SharePoint site, and someone accesses that, creates a new document, and sends it out the door before patent protection is filed. So in that case, as you know, in about 95% of the world, you've just blown your patent protection, which may have been your next multi-billion-dollar drug, right? So a tool like Copilot can endanger patent protection, right, if it can access the data that's underlying that before patent protection is filed. And then another topic in this area is employee theft. So, and by the way, none of these things are necessarily unique to Copilot or artificial intelligence, but the idea is these tools are so powerful that they can enable things to be happening very, very quickly and on a scale never before really contemplated. And so you have an employee who is aggrieved or is a leaver, about to leave in a couple weeks, wants to grab things. I like to say, if that employee downloads 3,000 documents, someone's going to notice, probably. But using a tool like Copilot or artificial intelligence tools can take that 3,000 documents, squish it down to 3, right? Chances are they can walk out the door with 3 pages or 3 of the most valuable and secret information, and it's going to evade all of your detection systems. So a tool like Copilot can certainly grease the skids and enable nefarious actors to take hold. So moving on to the next topic, I mentioned about data contamination. So many companies hold information of collaborators, perhaps something to the effect of acquisition talks, failed merger talks, information that's there in the universe held in confidence. Well, of course, Copilot can access all of that. And so we need to be mindful that when a tool like Copilot or others are reaching into third-party held confidential information, that's a violation of that agreement. That's a violation of the confidence for which you were provided to hold that information. And if you look at the court cases where stuff like this has happened, it has been hundreds of millions of dollars of liability have been assigned to companies who have violated the trust of third-party intellectual property held in their confidence. And so need to be very mindful of that. And law firms too, right? You hold lots of different client information. If this tool is combining client information, it's a violation of that client's rights and confidentiality. And so again, need to be very mindful of data contamination. Be mindful of my colleagues who want to speak. I'll just go through the next couple quickly. Attorney-client privileged. So if you share a memo or legal advice with your client, with the C-suite, again, someone can access that document, potentially, and if that content of that memo or that legal advice that you provided is then compiled into a new document, shared externally or shared with an unintended recipient, you may very well lose attorney-client privilege or work product privilege with it. Other things, Copilot, for example, can create music, it can create videos, it can create art. And so you can imagine a case where this can create new copyright liabilities as well. So this is another thing that we need to be mindful of, sort of a new novel area of legal responsibility that we need to be mindful of. And then the last thing I'll touch on is, so Copilot has the ability to record meetings, and we have, this is not limited to Copilot. There's a lot of artificial intelligence tools and companies offering, hey, we can record your meetings, and we can create a transcript, and that'd be great. This saves a lot of time of stenography and people taking minutes, and it can save hours and hours into seconds. Well, did you realize that the creation of that transcript is a recording, right? And it can be violating state and federal and international wiretapping laws. Not only that, this document may contain highly confidential information, right, that was discussed in a meeting. It may be a trade secret. It may be legally privileged information. It may be the subject of a litigation hold. All of this has now been captured on a transcript. And you need to be mindful of, what are the litigation hold requirements now we've created a brand new document? Must we produce that under a government investigation, under a litigation? All of these sort of things. And so, all to say, just to wrap it up, there's a lot of risks with the deployment of AI tools, and I think we as IP attorneys need to be mindful of when it impacts company or client intellectual property. And so how can we think about doing this in a responsible way that enables the use of the tool, but still protects and doesn't subject your client or your organization to new novel legal liabilities for violations of other people's assets, essentially.
So that should scare the hell out of you. But at the same time, it should give you hope, right? Because everybody across the world, news agencies, governments, business leaders are saying AI is going to take so many jobs away. And I listened to what Brian just said, and maybe, but not from us, because there's so much liability out there that we may need to pivot and all become, class action attorneys. But there's a lot of work out there in this space. For people who on the front end who are trying to make sure you and your companies are compliant, and then on the back end, that also is going to create liability and is going to create defense opportunities. But this is all about Julia because AI works and AI is exciting. Like we had in the conversation earlier with on drug pricing, everybody's upset about the price of drugs because everybody wants the drugs because they work. If they didn't work, if it was sort of like these hokey hair regrowth treatments that you see on late night TV, nobody would care about the price, right? Because you wouldn't want it, you try it, you throw it away because it didn't work. But pharmaceuticals work. AI works, and I think a lot of people can see the benefit it presents. So maybe we start there. Like what at the moment, and since this is life sciences, we can focus on that. But generally speaking, what does AI do really well today?
That's a great question. I think to some extent we should divide the world of AI into the large language models out there, and Microsoft has one, OpenAI has one. That's sort of the bedrock of what AI is built off of, and there needs to be the right type of dialogue with those providers to make sure that all the information in your SharePoint and is allocated and safeguarded in the right way, and you have access. So I think that's one topic I want to just touch on before we move on to this is definitely with the providers that are accessing all your information, you need to have the right type of dialogue and make sure that it is deployed in the way that makes sense for you. So that's one world of AI. Everyone is building and working off of that. And on top of that, we've got a whole world of new applications and new products that are being built to address specific pain points that individuals are facing. And so specifically in the world of patents, the world of law and world of patents is very word-based, and there's a lot of things that you need to translate into ideas, into paper, and so LLMs are very, very good with that. So the opportunity is there to think about AI in terms of how can I think about solving my day-to-day bigger problems, but then how do I think about solving my specific problems as a patent attorney? What are the key tasks that I am involved in? Perhaps that's drafting patents, responding to office actions, finding and defining what infringements you want to detect. And so I think that's kind of the world we're now moving into with AI is moving away from general solutions to solutions that really target your specific pain points. And I think for that, the governance is actually a bit more simple in some way, where the providers can be built and structured in a way where they're not learning off of your data. They're really a solution to help drive efficiency, to help you move away from the kind of grunt work that all of us deal with in all of our jobs, but think about transferring your time away from that and into higher value work. So that's sort of my view on the opportunities and specifically how it can support everyone in this room.
So let me also ask you, because we're talking about the risk of, and whenever you talk about trade secrets, the risk from within is much greater than the risk from outside, just because the people who you trust have access, and they may not intentionally do something, or they may. but they have a lot of access, so a lot more problems arise there. I think if I was following our conversation during the pre-call, right, you were talking about how AI might be able to help with internal compliance and keeping track of what's going on and identifying abnormal behaviors and flagging people that there's a concern, right? I mean, so AI can create some potential problems, but it can also be the solution to those problems if thoughtfully deployed, right?
Definitely. I think, again, this is the point I guess I was trying to make around being really thoughtful, strategic partners to how you want AI to be deployed in your organization, thinking about solutions that would be helpful to you. And this is one we talked about in a pre-call where, well, actually, if someone is doing specific activities with data, you could very easily monitor now that activity very, very efficiently and quickly with AI solutions. So are there opportunities to build around not only the new opportunities, but the opportunities to safeguard where kind of the direction of AI is going as well? So that's definitely the case.
Okay, good. So Dhruv, I know this idea of trade secret theft, and particularly employee, sometimes theft, sometimes carelessness was an issue you wanted to weigh in on as well.
Yeah, so it's something we think a lot about as well. And just picking up off of that discussion, AI tools are very good at pattern recognition, right? And they've been used for employee theft monitoring even before this. Conventional machine learning approaches have been used for this. What's nice about generative AI is it's really good at doing that as well, but it's also able to do it really well for unstructured data. So when I say unstructured data, I'm talking about things just like documents and folders, emails, things like that. So it is being extensively deployed for that purpose even now. I would say the legal considerations there seem to lie more on the privacy and the general AI regulation side of things. So when you're talking about privacy, there's obviously do you have consent? Have you provided enough notice to your employees that you're doing these things, that you're processing their information using these AI tools? And when I talk about AI laws, so that's where you have to start thinking about things like, what's the decisions you're making with these AI tools? Are you using that analysis that, hey, somebody randomly downloaded 2,000 files at 2 in the morning? Are you using it directly to make an employment decision? Are you blocking their account access immediately? Or are they more like human-in-the-loop steps along the way? So which kind of takes you out of that high-risk category of AI use that a lot of these AI laws would like to regulate, right? Mm-hmm. But it's definitely a very promising application of these new technologies.
Okay, good. Gary, there's a lot on the table. I'll let you respond to anything that you want to say. I know, but I would ask maybe if you put on your Chief IP Counsel hat here, and how do you see all of this playing out?
I see a lot of it as we're in an early stage. And a lot of the information that's coming out of AI isn't always accurate because it's pulling a lot of things. It doesn't know what combinations could and should be made. And it still needs somebody to review them and to say, yes, this is right. And I think there's a lot of that that's not taking place. Some I had seen in my past. The famous case of a gentleman that gave a case law to a judge. Well, they actually ended up finding out that in one of the cases it was off of a law school exam. A professor made up this case, and it ended up getting pulled into AI. It was very similar to what the attorney needed for court, and he submitted it to the judge. And it only existed in a law school setting. So I think there's a lot, it's great information. As time goes on, it'll learn. 20-something years ago, a company I worked for was using AI, it was taking pharmaceutical compounds, throwing it in. It was kind of machine learning at the time, and saying, yes, a fluorine at this position is toxic. This has been around a long time. It's going to evolve.
Yeah, good. And we also know lately there's been two situations Senator Grassley from the Judiciary Committee discovered where two different district court judges used AI, or at least their clerks used AI, and issued decisions citing cases that were non-existent. And that's how they got caught, with quotes and everything. And so this is not just, as somebody said earlier today, and I don't doubt this number, that there's been 160 instances where attorneys have been sanctioned for doing that by filing briefs that included cases that were non-existent. But there's also two examples, at least, of U.S. federal district court judges doing the same thing. So my takeaway here is that I think AI is extremely powerful. I think if you're not using it, you should be investigating using it for a whole host of different projects and use cases. But you have to be aware it's probably developmentally like 5 or 6 years old, and some of the decisions it makes are not good ones. Some of it feels like when I use it, you got to play exact words. If you don't give it exactly the right words, it's going to give you totally garbage. And I do think, and maybe we can kick this around, because I think prompting, and I was happy to see nobody said you're an expert, because I don't think anybody is an expert right now. And I wish I remember who it was. If you're here, feel free to raise your hand and contribute. But there was one of the pre-calls for one of the panels for this program where somebody was on and said that the prompts that they use when they give to AI can be in excess of 3 pages long. And I thought to myself, well, boy, I am totally inadequate, because I don't know. I mean, I'm getting better at it, but I wouldn't know what to say for 3 pages most often. That would be directing and useful. But if that's the kind of prompting you need to do to have AI give you what you want, then we all need to get much better at that and learn how to do that. Brian, you have any thoughts on prompting?
I'm going to turn it into a risk. How about that?
Yeah.
So be careful where your AI lives, right? If many of these are, even OpenAI, are now selling these enterprise-style things where it sort of lives on your environment, and the prompting that you put into it and the output that it gives doesn't go out to the universe, right? But many of these are public AI tools, right? And so just to be mindful that your prompt may contain confidential information, right? A 3-page prompt, which is great for getting you the result that you want, may include information about your company, about things that are not publicly known, financial information, whatever it is. And now you're sending that over the fence to whoever's on the other side of that AI tool, right? And if you look at the terms of use, they might have the right to store that data on their servers. They may have the right to use that prompt to train their model, right? And so now you're enabling subsequent users who might be your competitors to benefit from the prompting that you've done, right? Same with the output, right? So just be mindful of the prompting and of the outputs that it gives back to you do present certain risks to confidential information. Mm-hmm. But one other thing I just wanted to, when the other panels were talking, it just occurred to me that I think the theme that sort of I'm hearing even from this is it's all about being responsible for the end product that it produces, right? You're responsible if it produces crap case laws that doesn't exist, right? You're responsible if it makes up other things. You're responsible if it's pulling trade secret information or third-party information that you don't have access to. So I think what I would say to all of that as a good policy and a good risk mitigation aspect as individuals and for your organization is just be cognizant of what it does. And before you click send and send it over the fence to someone else, make sure that you have verified everything, right? Take the time to make sure that it didn't make up cases, right? Check the citations. And it will give you some things, but I've received some outputs for it. When I've clicked the link, it doesn't exist. And I've gone through and found that it made it up, right? So it does it all the time. So you need to take that extra step. Make sure that you go through and verify what it is before you compile that document and give it to your CEO, to give it to your client, to give it to a judge or to opposing counsel, right? It's on you as the user to ultimately be responsible for the work product that it produces.
Gary?
And one of the things with the information you get, whether it be science or law, you can correct it in AI. You can tell it that it's wrong. And if you don't do it, what happens is it becomes part of its learning. That hallucination becomes part of its learning, and then it perpetuates other hallucinations based on the fallacy. So a lot of times, you have to correct what's wrong.
Drew, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so I was at another conference a couple of weeks ago, and I don't have a citation for this, but someone cited a study where they found that 66% of attorneys who were using AI were not actually checking the output before using it for work. So I'm not sure what's going on, but people are excited. People are doing this. I think that's the reason why every other day, there's a new, case where somebody had a non-existent citation in their brief. It's happening. So just to reinforce what everybody said, I think we're all getting excited for a good reason, but also why we have to be doubly careful. I do want to pick up on the shadow AI thing that Brian was talking about. So when I say shadow AI, I'm talking about the use of AI that you're not allowed to use for work. Huge issue, obviously, for confidentiality, trade secret, but even attorney-client privilege as well. The good thing, the good news there is, I still remember, at least in the early days, we were playing whack-a-mole, we were blocking ChatGPT, and then we're blocking DeepSeek. And you can keep doing that if you want to safeguard your data. But now there are vendors out there that can wholesale block public AI websites for you. I'll put a little asterisk on that and just add a little nuance. So it sounds really good in principle, let's go out and block it all, like public cloud, all of it. But keep in mind that some of your scientists might have built things that would break if you actually did that. So just be careful if you're going to go that route. Maybe the best thing to do is not have a knee-jerk response and block everything, but do it in a staged way, inform people, allow them to to use without consequences, and build alternate approaches. But it's not as straightforward as it sounds as just not letting people use public AI. Mm-hmm. The last thing I'll say about that is one way to consume that information also is if you see you have 1,000 users who are using cloud for deep research, maybe it's time to go get an enterprise license. So you can also use that information to inform what you should be responsibly using and deploying.
Yeah. Gary, go ahead.
One of the things I've seen in companies I've talked to, they want to block the AI, but your competitors are using it. You're putting yourself and your company at a big disadvantage by doing that. It's a tool. It's like telling a mechanic you can't use a wrench. Mm-hmm. Others are going to use it, and you'll be left in the dust.
Yeah. So, Julia, I want to get you to comment on this here because I guess I didn't realize, and I should have realized this, but during our call you were talking about, the AI is not one size fits all. That you guys, for example, can come in and you can work with companies who maybe have more risk tolerance on some things and less risk tolerance on others, and you can put together a package internally that they're comfortable using and comfortable allowing their people to use, and have the protections in place that allow them to sleep at night, for lack of a better way to say it. Did I get that right? Is that, are there vendors like you guys where you can come in and say, tell me what you want to do, and I can tell you how to do that safely?
Yeah, I think that's where all the conversations should be at. If they're not, then that's where you should meet the vendors and have those types of conversations, because ultimately, all of these providers are building for you, and so it only makes sense to deploy something that works within your infrastructure, your risk tolerance level, your appetite. And obviously this is the life sciences world, and we obviously deal with customers in other sectors where perhaps we're still talking about IP, but the value, as we saw earlier on the slides, of every single invention is really, really large here. So I think that's the type of conversation everyone should be having with their providers, and thinking about sort of it as a partnership. And I think, Gary, you were saying that it's a competitive advantage, and I think that's something that when we think about the risks, we should also be thinking about where we are today and how quickly we've moved in the last couple of years with AI. Where will we be in 5 years' time? And it's moving very quickly, and I think the best approach is to take a balanced one. Dipping your toes in a way that makes sense to you, learning along that journey, teaching and propagating that learning across the whole organization so that you can adapt and adopt in the way that makes most sense for you and can compete, and in 5 years' time be happy with where you've ended up in the market.
Mm-hmm. So, Brian, any thoughts on anything that was just said? Open mic for you.
Yeah, I think AI is transformative. We absolutely should be adopting it and looking to match for the tool for the job, but also be mindful. You should do your due diligence, right? Mm. So even if we look at sort of the AI providers that are sprouting up for legal practice, there's hundreds, thousands of them now, right? Most of them are startups. How do we know what they are? Who do we know is behind them, right? Is it a foreign government? You don't know. And so I think as we look to deploy tools that are going to enhance the science, the development, enhance the practice of law, and all of the other things that go with operating a business, like everything we do, we can't just jump in and ignore the risks, right? I think we should do our proper due diligence, make sure you assess any vendor who's providing, how long have they been around? Have they been sued for data breaches? Who are their backers? Do we know? It's not just, does the tool work? We'll presume that it works well, but think about, the other things is like, okay, adopting that tool, making it enterprise-wide, what risk does it present to our company? And so we need to make sure we do the proper due diligence before doing that.
Yeah, and I just want to say, and this is something I say every time we talk about AI, I'm going to put it a little bit differently, but you want to work with the adults in the room. And by that what I mean is, and I'm sure most of you have had this experience where you get an email from somebody and you go, maybe you don't even check, but because I'm trying to educate myself and learn what's going on out there, you get these crazy emails saying, oh, with my AI, you can draft an entire patent application in 10 minutes. It's like, okay, well, no, you can't. That will never be the case during our useful practice existence. It'll take more than that amount of time just to figure out what information I want you to use, right? And then you go and you look at the people who are behind those folks. And good on them on some level, but some of them are still in college. Some of them graduated college 6 months ago. They're very entrepreneurial, and that's great and all, but if you're not working with the adults in the room who understand the pressures and the risks that we're all talking about here today, you are just like, oh my God, walking in, you're like walking into a scene out of Monty Python. It's going to be a catastrophe, and everybody watching is going to find it hilarious because you can see the catastrophe coming, right? I mean, does somebody who's like 21 years old and just founded a startup company last week, do they understand the confidentiality requirements or the litigation hold requirements or how many here do you really understand attorney-client work product or attorney-client privilege and work product privilege? Like one or two of you, right? I mean, you kind of know, you kind of, put your hands down, you don't know. I mean, Charlie probably knows. He's a litigator, and I know he's been involved in some of these things. But you kind of know what it is, right? And you kind of know for sure this qualifies. You kind of know for sure that doesn't qualify. But you don't know exactly where that line is, right? If you're honest, most of you. right? Most of you don't. I mean, a couple of the litigators in the room probably have a much better chance at knowing pretty damn close. But the rest of us, like, well, I remember in law school that we talked about that. Okay, if that's your recollection of these privileges, I can assure you it's old. So how are we going to trust somebody who, with your data, that has never even taken that law school class? You know, that's never even had to work in a situation where, you know, national security. I mean, some of the people I know at Anchor that are doing the program for you guys have done national security level and have national security top level security clearances. Well, check that box in my mind, right? I mean, now you know somebody who understands the importance of keeping a secret. And if you're not working with people like that, and there's a lot of them, and it's not just, there's a lot of people in their field, but there's also a lot of pretenders, and you got to be careful. And don't ever forget, if it sounds too good to be true, what is it? Too good to be true, right? So, and what you see is, I think, the real legitimate, and I won't ask you to comment on this, but if you can, if you want, but I think the real legitimate companies are the ones that tell you, no, this is what we can do. This is not what we can do. We're working on that. And they're honest with you. And I think honesty in this space from a vendor is so critically important.
And I would add, if it's free, you are the product. And it's just a case of, like, the scientists want to use it, right? They look, I got this free AI tool I found. You know, somebody emailed me and it's like really, really cool. Well, yeah, because they want your data, right? They're gonna, you know, use it to train their model and enhance it and sell to the next person. So, yeah, to your point, it's you just need to be mindful of really who you're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. Gary, thoughts on that?
And where the data is going, do export controls apply?
Right,
And
because, you know, that never gets applied until it gets applied.
No.
You know, that's like one of the, like an ethics rule. They never really start looking at all the stuff you did wrong 10 years ago until you did something really wrong today.
Yeah. And what are the confidentiality laws in that other country or countries?
Dhruv?
To be a little candid, I think since I take part in AI governance a fair bit, my assessment right now is all that sounds great, but most of the tools are not being rolled out with adequate technological mitigations in place. I mean, just going off the Copilot example right now, okay, if you're going to release a tool that's going to commingle data from 10 sources, find me a way to label the data from 10 sources. Like, give me a site, tell me exactly where this portion of the output came from, so I can make an informed decision about it, right? So, you know, I spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, the 3 prongs of risk mitigation, which is people's, processes, and technologies. I think the technology portion is sorely lacking in that regard. So what that means is you have to rely on educating people and the guardrails and processes you put in place to enable responsible AI use.
And I'll get to the question in 1 minute, but Julie, I want to give you an opportunity to comment on the secrecy, confidentiality, the, you know, like, what do you say, you know, as a vendor, what do you think is critical for people to have front of mind?
I would say ask the questions, all the questions that you have in the back of your mind, and we talked about quite a few of them here. So, how is my data managed? Where is it stored? In which country is it stored? Where do I feel comfortable with the data being stored? How long is the data retention policy for? These are all things that you should be asking, and there's a good answer, and so you should be asking those questions so you can feel comfortable that what you're getting back is in the remit that you're comfortable with.
You know, and the reliable companies will have an answer, and it will not just be an answer, it'll be an answer that will put your mind at ease. And if they get upset for you asking these questions, then that's just not somebody that you can work with. That's a red flag. Because these are table stakes. You know, you can't even go into this if the person you're working with is not comfortable with understanding the risk that you're assuming, both personally by sticking your neck out by favor of adopting a tool, and the company, what's at stake. I mean, because in this area, you lose the wrong piece of information, and it's not worth $1 million. It's not worth $100 million. It could be worth multiple billions of dollars. You know, so there is a lot at risk.
And I would also add that there is, you know, SOC 2 and ISO, and so ask the kind of questions. How is this business dealing with data more generally? What is their GDPR? Ask all the general questions, because they should have one, and if they're, as you say, sort of a proper company that you can rely on, then and that's what you work internally, that's what they should also be working towards. And that's the foundation of where we started with Ankar, is really getting all of that in place before you can even consider starting and calling up any customers to try.
Yeah, because the good companies don't get offended by that question. Like a con person gets offended when you ask them the difficult question that you want. And not saying that there's cons in this, but we all probably watch American Greed or some show, right, that talks about some Ponzi scheme or whatever, and it's just always funny that it's like the legitimate people are willing to answer the questions, and when it gets tossed back on you like you're the problem for how dare you not trust me, okay, might as well hit me with the red flag, in the face, because that's not the right answer. Somebody had a question here. Yeah, Sarah, go ahead. So the question, just so we get this on the recording, because I really want to hear your answer here. Every organization is going to have one or more cowboys who think they know better and are shooting from the hip and not necessarily playing by the rules that have been put in place. How do you rein that person in, or maybe also put up guardrails to make sure that that person doesn't get too far out in front of you?
Yeah, it's like if you block all of these sites, they're just going to go to their phone
Right.
and do it, right? And so I think part of the solution is to enable tools to be available, right? Because if you block everything or you block most things, then they're just going to go to the things that they're comfortable with. So I think as organizations, you need to strike the right balance, making sure that they do have the tools that they want to use available, and when you can control it. And it's within your environment, and you can put the controls in place that enable it to be used in a responsible way. Beyond that, I think you do have to continue to educate. I think Drew said it, you have to educate, then you have to re-educate, and then you have to educate some more, and then you keep educating, right? It's a changed mindset, right, that we have as organizations need to think about protecting our data, right? The things that we work very hard for, things that we spend years building. Why would you want to throw that away for a 5-minute convenience to use ChatGPT? It doesn't make a lot of sense. So really changing the mindset of people to have a data protection first mindset, I think will help. Not going to eliminate cowboys. There's always going to be that person who's going to not play by the rules. But if we can try to eliminate multiple cowboys, right, I think it's going to be better off for us. So that would be my recommendation.
And I would just add, I think, not that this is particularly insightful, but at some point in time, if you're giving the team tools that they need, and then you have somebody who is going around that, you have to cut your losses, I think, and walk away. Now, I understand in this space, in all spaces, there are people who you tolerate and you get away with a lot more. Like the quarterback of the team gets away with a lot more than the backup running back does, right? So you got to factor that in. But at some point in time, there's just too much at risk that, assuming you've done your part to give them the tools, then it's uncomfortable. But if they're going to continue to play fast and loose with your secrets, then I think you need to take action.
Well, one of the things which actually came out of a table discussion from the AI IPWatchdog was that it's basically Wikipedia times a million. People were putting information into Wikipedia, and they started finding confidential information and other things and misinformation. It's people need to be able to monitor it and look at it.
And that's the problem. That's the difference with Wikipedia. It's all there for everybody to see. So you can see when somebody has hijacked an entry. If you know that space, and there's other things that maybe if you're not in that space, it's not so obvious. But with this area, it's in the background. It's not in the front, so you don't know that somebody is hijacked either intentionally or unintentionally or fed it full of confidential information. And that's where, for our space, is a huge risk, not just for life sciences, but for innovation in general. Because if you do go to AI and it's not a siloed environment, is it giving you something that somebody else believes they own the IP on? Because one of their employees fed it in, but they'd already filed a patent application, and now it's part of the common knowledge. And You know, there's a lot of liability out there on that front, I think, to be, not at the moment maybe, but as AI gets better and closer to being an inventor or co-inventor, that can be a real concern, I think. So, all right, so let's go into the wind down phase, because I want to give each of you an opportunity to put your exclamation point on something that we've talked about or your takeaway message. And Brian, we can start with you and give Julia the last word. What do you hope people remember from this conversation today?
So use AI. Everyone should be using it. Organizations should be using it, but use it responsibly. I think it behooves all of us as stewards of our organization to ensure that it is used responsibly, and I think we need to be proactive about that. Right, to your question about is there litigation, well, maybe not, but you don't want your company's name to be attached to that case, right? You don't want it to be the blah, blah rule with your name behind it either. So I think just to be mindful of the risks, think about them actively, monitor for new ones, and try to mitigate them as best you can under the circumstances in a very rapidly moving space.
Great, thanks a lot, Brian. Gary?
Trust but verify.
Yeah, that's a good advice. Thanks, Gary. Dhruv?
I love Copilot, for the record. You'll have to pry it from my cold, dead hands. But I'll sort of beat a dead horse, actually. So you have to know how your company uses AI to govern it selectively and appropriately. And again, you're using it. If you have, I know it's a life sciences master's program, but if you have quantitative pharmacologists, you have bioinformatics, biostatisticians, you have people doing PK/PD studies, they're all using it. If they're not using it, your HR is using it, your commercial teams are using it. Every company is a tech company now, whether you do life sciences or something else. So you all have to learn to get your arms around it.
Awesome, great, thanks, Dhruv. And Julia, the last word goes to you.
I would say that it's a partnership, and so be part of the roadmap, be part of the evolution of AI as it's evolving in your space. It's really at the start, and so you have the opportunity to shape it in the way you want it to go, maybe using solutions that already exist, but if there are new ones, thinking and working with partners and vendors to build them and make them work in your workflow. And so I think that's our position, at least. The world of AI and IP is still evolving very much so, and so there's a lot of room to grow still.
And there's a lot of opportunity out there, and if you're not using it yet, you got to at least start to kick the tires and consider what it can do for you. Because as has come up here, you're at a competitive disadvantage if you're not using it, because it does do things very fast, and it does certain tasks very well. And if you haven't demoed some stuff, you might be surprised at how well it does things that you probably don't think it does. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to create something that's fileable in all instances, but it gets you shockingly down the road on a lot of tasks, from searching to first drafts to draft office action responses. And it can make you and your team and your company much more efficient. So, thank you, panel. That was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.